In this centennial year of powered flight in Canada, the Canadian Air and Space Museum introduces the museum's revitalization and expansion project, which focuses on creating strong identity and brand equity for Canadian aerospace companies and the industry. By showcasing the aerospace industry's proud history of technology, leadership, and innovation, the Canadian Air and Space Museum will help build strong public and political support for the Canadian aerospace industry and encourage renewed investments in aerospace technology development, as well as support specific corporate marketing mandates. In addition to these goals, the Canadian Air and Space Museum will place high priority on creating experiential learning pathways that will engage Canadian youth in hopes of inspiring them to careers in the aerospace industry. What better way to ensure that the industry continues to foster the high caliber of professionals needed for the future? Once the home of de Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited, the Canadian Air and Space Museum is located in the oldest surviving aircraft factory in Canada and one of Canada's oldest and best preserved aerospace heritage buildings. De Havilland Canada is known worldwide for the design and production of legendary aircraft such as the Tiger Moth, Mosquito, Chipmunk, Beaver, Turbo Beaver, Otter, Twin Otter, Caribou, Buffalo, and Dash 7. The building itself is also the birthplace of the leading Canadian space technology company, best known as SPAR. Now in its 10th year, the museum has grown thanks in large part to the dedicated efforts of its volunteers. Although the museum has received little external funding, its members have achieved many successes, which include the renovation of a portion of the old de Havilland aircraft factory totaling 34,000 square feet, the construction of a full-size replica of the magnificent Avro Aero, the ongoing restoration of the City of Toronto's Avro Lancaster bomber, the celebration of the 80-year history of aerospace innovation at Downsview, beginning with de Havilland Canada and continuing with Bombardier Aerospace, the 50-year history of Downsview as an Air Force base. Other museum exhibits that exist as a result of countless volunteer hours include Canadian Women in Aviation, the history of aircraft manufacturing in Canada, the evolution of the Canadian airline industry, the development of Canada's jet engine industry, Canadian inventions in aviation medicine such as the G-suit, and more. The museum is a popular field trip destination for over 2,000 schools that are within a 1-hour bus ride from Downsview Park. Museum educational programs are aligned with Grade 6 Theory of Flight and Grade 10 Canadian History curriculum. Visitors to the museum can also take a guided tour of the historic buildings that surround the museum, such as the original de Havilland factories first established in 1929 and parts of the former RCAF Station Downsview Air Force Base. A few times a year, the museum teams up with Bombardier Aerospace to showcase vintage and modern aircraft at Downsview, utilizing Bombardier's private 7,000-foot runway. The most compelling question to ask is who and what is the Canadian Air and Space Museum? The museum is primarily dedicated to telling the distinctly Canadian stories of aviation, space history, and innovation. And while we are telling the stories of aerospace science and technology, we are equally telling the stories of the people connected to these innovations. And in doing so, we are not only chronicling their achievements, we are honoring these larger-than-life pioneers. One of the main focuses of the museum is educating youth with the hopes of inspiring a new generation of innovators and inventors. This is one of the many reasons why the museum believes that it's important to showcase Canada's contribution to worldwide aerospace and to repatriate Canadian aerospace artifacts. In the museum's current form, the Avro Aero is homeless. The revitalization and expansion project will create a home for the Aero in the Avro Canada Gallery. In addition, the Lancaster bomber will also find a home in the Aviation of Defense Gallery, where visitors can comfortably, clearly, and safely view the restoration of this historic aircraft. A classroom area will be created known as the Science of Flight Center. A civil aviation and transport gallery will showcase Canada's accomplishments in the commercial airline industry. And Toronto's illustrious aviation history will be showcased in its own unique gallery area. Outside, visitors can marvel at the Bombardier Commercial Airline Gallery. Other unique and new museum areas will include an area dedicated to aerospace innovation and research, a 100-seat state-of-the-art education theater, an educational workshop, a historic gallery devoted to telling the history of de Havilland, Canada, an area where restoration and fabric demonstration projects can be viewed by visitors, as well as the restoration and recreation of the original de Havilland, Canada office gallery. The museum will also boast a comprehensive aerospace library and archives. In addition, the museum will offer a first-rate gift shop. The Canadian Air and Space Museum is located in the largest market in Canada and fourth largest market in North America. Located in Canada's leading tourist destination, the museum is situated just 2 kilometers off the busiest Canadian highway. It's fitting that this national museum is located in Canada's only national urban park. The museum's historical site is an attraction within an attraction and is easily accessible by both car and public transit. It's interesting to note that aerospace museums are the highest attended museums in the world. Our target audience includes aviation, history, and space enthusiasts, as well as families and educational groups. Based on our research, the new Canadian Air and Space Museum should realize between 250 and 400,000 visitors per year. Moreover, our newly created virtual online museum will be viewed by millions around the world. The Canadian Air and Space Museum offers an opportunity to showcase your organization's historical significance and accomplishments in the aerospace industry as it relates to Canada. Exhibits and programs can be created to educate youth and the public about your organization's history and innovations. As well, the museum will profile your corporate contribution to Canada and provide an opportunity to exercise corporate responsibility. Airport access to a 7,000-foot runway allows your organization to fly in and participate in museum events in a comprehensive manner. As the media hub for the country, by partnering with the Canadian Air and Space Museum, you increase the chances of national media coverage. If you would like to take advantage of the unique opportunities available at the Canadian Air and Space Museum and would like to showcase your organization as a leader in the industry, the museum will devote a team of exhibit designers, multimedia specialists, and educational program designers to create a custom program that will respond to the needs and goals of your organization. The Canadian Air and Space Museum celebrates the Canadian aerospace industry's proud 100-year heritage of technology, leadership, and innovation. Your participation is urgently needed, not just to preserve, revitalize, and expand this valuable and esteemed historical site, but to make Canadians and visitors from around the world aware of the contribution that the Canadian aerospace industry has made to their well-being, to their families, and to their communities. With your support, the new Canadian Air and Space Museum will powerfully enhance the positive image of Canada's aerospace industry. With youth, with our civic and political leaders, and with all Canadians as well as the international community. Thank you for welcoming this message and for taking the time to consider the tremendous value that the new Canadian Air and Space Museum offers your company and the Canadian aerospace industry.